Well, greetings and welcome to the fourth part of Buddhism. Last time we talked about the general aspects of Theravada Buddhism and then looked at the split off of Mahayana Buddhism and then to some degree Tibetan Buddhism. And we noted that there was a difference in how they practiced Buddhism, and especially for the getting out of the cycle of reincarnation. And so there you can see there's a lot of variations and various teachings in those. But now we're moving into some of the central things. We left off last time with the differences, shared teachings between Hinduism and Buddhism. But now we're going to get into the main tenets or teachings of Buddhism that pretty much go across the board. Let me share the screen with you here, and we'll get started. Last time we looked at this one with the relationship between Hinduism but the differences between those. But now we'll move on into the tenets, and there's four basic tenets, and we'll start with those, but it'll move into the eightfold path, and all of these will be things that they share in common, both the Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism for the most part. Now, Mahayana Buddhism, how you get released from that cycle of reincarnation, samsara, will be different, and the aspect of the soul, what's the status of the soul, is different in Theravada Buddhism than it is in Mahayana Buddhism. So just keeping those in mind, we'll talk about those a little bit later, a little bit more. Four truths. The first truth is truth of suffering. All forms of existence are subject to physical and mental suffering. And so life is suffering, basically, from a Buddhist perception. You go through this cycle, reincarnation, but it's just a cycle of suffering. And this goes back to what we saw with Buddha's life, that he came out of his protected area and he just saw suffering. And so this is one of the four truths. And then the second is the cause of suffering is desire for possessions, selfish enjoyment of every kind, particularly the desire for separate individual existence. In other words, you could say attachments to this world, being attached to the things of the world and enjoying those things of the world, that kind of thing. They said that's the cause of the suffering. We become very selfish and individually selfish when we should be seeing ourselves as part of the greater existence. That, don't be self-centered. And then suffering ceases when selfish desires are denounced and ceases. So if you can get away from these desires, or you can overcome the desires, or get rid of those attachments to this world, and that's where the meditation comes in and all those things. And that's how you eventually reach enlightenment, is to meditate your way out of those attachments of it. And that's the only way that suffering can exist, or got rid of anyway. The eightfold path leads to enlightenment. So now the fourth truth is you got to look at the eightfold path. And if you follow that eightfold path, it will assist you in attaining enlightenment. So we're going to look at the eightfold path now and see what are the things in there that we've practiced. You could reach enlightenment according to Buddhism. This path, the path of perfect detachment, also known as the middle way that we mentioned earlier on. because it avoids both self-indulgence and self-mortification. And so it leads to the cessation of suffering if you can do it perfectly. It allows for a person to escape from that cycle of rebirth, which is just a cycle of suffering. But to do it, it's a full-time commitment, and out of that, that's why you have the order of monks being formed, that community that we talked about. That they spend their time. Most of their time is to meditate, and so that they can work their way out of this wheel of suffering that's going on. And as we said in Theravada Buddhist, not for the common man. Now in Mahayana Buddhism, we saw that they try to make it more available to the common person. And there were ways given to accommodate for common folks that they could concentrate on things and accomplish it, but they didn't have to get this total detachment type of thing. So the total detachment, they do it by having love or compassion or a few other things like that. All right, so the Eightfold Path are right views, right desires, right speech, right conduct, right mode of livelihood, right effort, right awareness, or you might say mindfulness, and right meditation. And we're going to look at each one of those as we go along here to see what these include. So the right view, this involves the acceptance of the four truths and a resolute rejection of unworthy attitudes or acts such as covetousness, lying, or gossip. You have to be free from such things is what helps you towards that path of liberation. So as you get the right desires and get rid of the wrong desires, that are the wrong desires as selfish desires. But I say for people to do that, of course, they must want to change before they can actually do the change. And we would tend to agree with that. Right speech. One's speech should be plain, truthful, abhorring lying, tale-bearing, and harsh, deceptive speech. Words must be gentle, soothing to the ear, penetrating to the heart, useful, rightly timed, and according to the facts. And I think that's why you often see in movies monks, and they tend to have this very hushed tone about them, and it's supposed to be a soothing sound in the way they talk in that. Right conduct. To follow this path, one must practice charity and without ego and self-centeredness. So your conduct can't be self-centered or for your own selfish goals. In this, you can follow the 5 precepts of not killing any living thing, not stealing, not lying, no lying, no drinking intoxicants, and not sexually immoral. They have a saying, while morality forms the basis of higher life, wisdom completes it. The right mode of livelihood. This path requires harming no one and being free from luxury. That's why we saw earlier, they shouldn't sleep in big beds. Anything that's unnecessary for, like, if you need it for sleeping, well, you really just need a cot to get sleep. You don't have to have all the luxuries that go with it, is the idea. Each must take up work which will give scope to his abilities and make him useful to his fellow men, and the attainment and help him towards the attainment of liberation, in other words. Right effort. Press forward in 4 directions, basically. Avoid increasing evil or following evil cravings. Overcome evil for wholesome living. In other words, you want wholesome living as opposed, and that will help you overcome any kind of evil things that you might want to do. Develop meritorious conditions, detachment, investigation of law, concentration, rapture. The idea, you want to develop conditions that help you to detach from the things of the world that pull you away into that area of suffering, that pull you into the area of suffering. You bring meritorious conditions which already exist, and you bring those to maturity and perfection is the idea. And so, so you're centering on the good that's available. Right awareness or mindfulness. This is a meditative awareness. So and you do this by mindfulness of, centering your mind on things. And this is a very work oriented in that you have to discipline your mind in all of these things to get away from the detachments, to have nothing in the world interfering with that meditation. Get away from harmful thoughts and feelings. So the cravings from those and the ego filling activities, you can discern them and overcome them through your meditation or mindfulness of things. So that's the awareness. This leads to the final eighth of the eightfold path, right meditation. And this is when you're getting into this eightfold. This one is the one that the monks center on. They fulfill the first seven as they're fulfilling it, and they finalize it or complete it through this meditation process. Concentration on a single object with all hindrance overcome. So somehow you get away from all these attachments and center on something that will help you to leave all those things in the world, all those attachments to the world behind. And the purpose is to be purified from all distractions and evils and filled with rapture, happiness, equanimity. So you're moving away from those things, and we having this inner tranquility that's developing. Ultimate goal is to pass beyond the sensation of either pleasure or pain into a state of transcending tranquility of consciousness. Ultimately, this leads you into attaining full enlightenment, a state of perfection, having overcome all those attachments to the world, which will allow you release from the cycle of samsara when you die. And so those are that is the eightfold path. There are three characteristics of existence that we need to talk about, or you could say three characteristics of reality. That is, first of all, anicca, impermanence that leads to suffering. This world is totally impermanent. It's always changing, always changing. It's in that cycle of reincarnation all the time. And, and that is part of what is, that whole thing is suffering. Dukkha, suffering, which is because of unhealthy attachments to things in the world. We suffer because we have these attachments to this world. And so that's one of the other characteristics of this existence of reality, is that we have these attachments that we need to get rid of. Anatta, or we say, this is, if you remember in Hinduism, there was Atman, the soul. Another way of saying this, anatta, is Atman, which is no soul. So there's no permanent soul in Theravada Buddhism. Now, not so in Mahayana Buddhism. Oftentimes in Mahayana Buddhism, there is a permanent soul who goes through the cycle of reincarnation, but when that soul gets liberated, there is the liberation of the soul as well. In Theravada, there's no soul that goes through the cycle of reincarnation. And so soul doesn't matter in Theravada Buddhism for getting released from the cycle of reincarnation, where it does, and even in Mahayana Buddhism, some views you end up in heavenly place, and enjoy kind of a paradise similar to Christian thinking in that regard. But Atman, Atta, I should say, no permanent soul or self, and we have to remember that in this world, it's illusion. We'll talk about that here. The main purpose of Buddhism is to escape from this cycle of reincarnation, of suffering, and the cycle is called samsara. And eventually, if you do get released from it, you reach nirvana, which basically means you cease to exist. Or you could say realize one's self extinctedness or extinction, you could say. Nirvana is the word itself. It just means blown out, which is kind of interesting. But it's this unconditional state of liberation, release from the cycle of rebirth, redeath, which is all determined by karma, your good deeds, bad deeds. And in Theravada Buddhism, the only thing that goes through the cycle of rebirth, since the soul is impermanent too, the only thing that goes through the cycle of reincarnation is karma, which when you come out on the other side, if you had more good karma than bad, you went up in the level of, purity. Theravada Buddhism doesn't believe in caste system, but like in Hinduism. In Theravada Buddhism, there is no ultimate reality, no Brahman like in Hinduism behind the illusionary world we live in. But there's nothingness, or what they call sunyata, the void. So there is no ultimate reality back there. So like in Hinduism, the soul, if it gets released from samsara, it's like a dropper over the ocean, a little drop of water, and it gets absorbed into Brahman. That doesn't exist in Theravada Buddhism. It's just you cease to exist. So there's no Atman or no soul in people. In Theravada Buddhism, or we mentioned earlier, Mahayana, there can be. Karma in Buddhism is the actions of the body or mind which produce a fixed consequence for the present life or the future life. So whatever deed it is, if it's good deed, bad deed, and that goes through the cycle of reincarnation and ultimately decides your state in the next reincarnation. Unless you, in the meantime, you find enlightenment, then you won't go through the next cycle when you die, and you'll cease to exist. You'll be in nirvana. All right, well, that's the basic tenets of Buddhism as a whole, keeping in mind some of the variations that come with the different groups in Mahayana Buddhism side. If you look at a Buddhist shrine, you might see, like here, the body of the Buddhist. You might see a sacred text, and then the stupa, which represents the mind of Buddha. Then you have various containers down here, that have things. They have drinking water in, feet washing water, rice and flour are common, things that are used, in cooking food. A lamp that they may have, scented type of water for anointing, and so you get your rice and food. And conch shell, the ting shag, represents the awakening to hear the dharma, the duty, what your duty is, and so forth. And so that you might see something like that in Buddhist areas or Buddhism practice frequently. A reminder that when we went over the worldviews, discerning worldviews, we did look at Buddhism, and you have the Buddhist worldview. Now, remember, all this is the world, but it's all Maya. It's all illusion. It's not really real, and it's full of suffering and wrong desires, attachments to the world. But you go through this cycle of samsara, but the only thing that really goes through the cycle in Theravada Buddhism is karma. The self and soul really just, it's impermanent as well, so it doesn't go through the cycle. And so you go through the cycle, and based on your karma, you come back either up the purity scale or down the purity scale. And but you're constantly, if you're wanting to get out of this cycle, you're trying to attain enlightenment each time you go through. But like we said, Theravada Buddhism, only the monks really participate in this kind of thing. It's not made for the common people. On the other hand, Mahayana Buddhism perspective, the self and soul does go through the cycle of reincarnation. Buddha is deified, so you kind of get this dotted line here showing that this is has Buddha an upper area, and so Buddha gets to be worshipped. Well, you still have karma, your good deeds, bad deeds that go through this, and it goes through with your soul. And depending on the various ones, we looked at several types of Mahayana Buddhism, just as a sample. There's many types. But for example, you may practice compassion, and if you practice it well enough, and you'll eventually reach enlightenment. And the Buddhas are Bodhisattvas, the ones that could be Buddhists but stayed behind to help people to attain enlightenment. They may help you to reach nirvana, but nirvana is kind of redefined. It's no longer just necessarily a place of non-existence, but can be like heaven if you're doing what's right and get that enlightenment. If you're reincarnated back, you lower down the scale, it's this form of hell in that regard. So there is some difference between Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. But the original Buddhism was the Theravada brand, but Mahayana Buddhism, developed out of trying to get it down to where common folks can access it to one degree or another. So some important terms to remember: karma, cause and effect. What you sow is what you reap, we might say, as Christians. Good deeds do not cancel out evil deeds, but you have more good deeds than bad deeds that will help you move up the cycle. Impermanence. Everything is in change, goes through a cycle of birth, growth, decay, and death. Not really no such thing as death per se, because you're just being reborn all the time. The only thing different from all that is if you get enlightenment, you get released from the cycle. So there is no actual death. The world of phenomena and the very universe itself has a purely relative existence. And that's part of that Maya. It's not really real. And this is the lack of absolute reality. And it applies to the self or the soul as well. There's nothing eternal or immortal inside a person's body in Theravada Buddhism. And so this concept of impermanence is a perspective of the world. It's part of a deep aspect of their Buddhist worldview. Nirvana. It's an ethical state, a condition which eliminates any future rebirths, the extinction of desires, final release from suffering. And basically, it's not a place; it's a non-existence. And we talked about Anna Atman and not that no soul, non-self earlier. Sunyata, the void, nothing possesses essential, enduring identity, as everything is interconnected in a chain of co-becoming and in a state of constant flux. And so, and then Shah, uh, doing no injury by word or deed is what that word means. And so when we think about, we tend to think in linear history from a Christian worldview, and even from a secular worldview, there was a beginning, there's going to be an end. And for life itself, it's death. When Gautama was asked about that, he basically wouldn't answer whether there was existence after death. But as you can see, really, there isn't. But his answer was this statement, which is quite interesting. There is, disciples, a condition where there is neither earth nor water, neither air nor light, neither limitless space nor limitless time, neither any kind of being, neither ideation nor non-ideation, neither this world nor that world. There is neither arising nor passing away, nor dying, neither cause nor effect, neither change nor standing still. Now, and so very esoteric idea that nothing is, everything is changing in the world. And so, and the end of it is, nothingness. If we talk about Christianity and Buddhism, some of the bridges between them and things that they have in common, they both value life. You can see that you're not supposed to kill, and they can sometimes take it. They don't kill bugs. They certainly wouldn't go hunting animals and things like we might do, but we do share in a value of life at one level with them, certainly human life. And the individuals are of value in their faith system. Moderation and ethics. They believe in doing things in moderation is to cut down on those attachments. And, and they have strict ethics about how they should act and things they should do and not do. So we share in those things, and a lot of the ethics they're committed to is things we would be committed to: not lying, not stealing, all those we looked at earlier. Both, in a sense, are seeking enlightenment, but it's quite different. Enlightenment for Buddhists is by their self-discipline and being able to meditate themselves out of the attachments in this world, where our enlightenment is not by works, but by our commitment to Christ, and He's made that enlightenment possible through Him, you could say, but we would call it salvation, right relationship with Him. But you can see in Mahayana Buddhism, there's tends more of that side than Theravada Buddhism. Both empathize with suffering. We may not just look at the world as just constantly a cycle of suffering. We definitely recognize suffering exists, and that is something that we should help to overcome. realizing that, it's an ongoing type of thing, generation after generation, to try to alleviate that as best we can, knowing that until this world comes to the end, probably we're never going to get totally rid of it. Committed relationships is important in Christianity as well as in Buddhism, and emphasis on living life and loving and in right relationships is important in Buddhism as well. So you can see that in lifestyle type of things, we share a lot of similar values. And so that might be helpful if you're talking to a Buddhist sometime, that you can talk about those shared aspects between them. All right, well, that gets us to the end of the fourth presentation on Buddhism and the final one. And so we will pick up with another series later on. But for now, I'll bid you good day.